All right, so welcome back everybody to the monthly AVH last 2019 monthly AVH webinar. Sorry that we're a little late. We've got with us tonight. It's my actually honor and pleasure to welcome my friend Tim Fior, who's just an awesome homeopath, and we've been studying together with Andre for what? I think the 3-year course is what, Tim, going on the 12th year? 13th
Something
year?
like that. It just it's I can't even keep track anymore.
And he's in practice with a Hahnemannian scholar who's joined us for 2-3 webinars, Joel Shepard. And tonight he's going to share a bit about a 500-page monograph that the Materia Medica Pura project did that is on corneum. Man, take it away, Tim, because I know we only have an hour.
All right, Jeff. So thank you, and welcome to everyone who's on the webinar or who's going to be viewing this afterwards. It's my pleasure to present to you the AVH. I know you guys, we've really appreciate the help that you've given us at the IHMA in terms of broadcasting our monthly meetings, or 6 times a year monthly meetings for our study group, and we really appreciate that. Is it all right? I'm projecting my so people can see me if that's important. Is that all right?
It's fine if I presume that's what you'd prefer to do, but you can do it either way, Tim.
Okay. So, and you can see the monograph?
Yep.
Okay, so let's get into it. I've given Jeff and Susan both a copy of the monograph so they can distribute it amongst the group. And I think Jeff was trying to put it actually on the GoToWebinar. It's basically the summary, the genius and the summary of Conium maculatum. It started off as like a 100-page document that Andre created. We're in the International Hahnemannian Study Group. We are basically focusing on cancer. Ever since Andre's son came down with a really virulent form of ALL, he has kind of devoted his life to trying to improve outcomes in homeopathy with cancer. And I think he's getting there. And one of the stops on that path was doing the Conium monograph, which has now gotten up to, as part of the MMPP project, has gotten up to over 600 pages and over 300 cases, actually 634 pages and 317 cases. So basically he wrote a book, a thick book on Conium. So this is just the summary. It's 26 pages, the summary. We're going to go over it briefly and take questions at the end. I've got a few animal cases that hopefully we can mention. I know Susan had an interesting fish case that we can talk about. So what is Conium? It's called hemlock or spotted hemlock. And the reason it's spotted hemlock, because of the stems, it's spotted. It's one of the most poisonous plants in the world and 3rd most frequent reported plant poisoning in humans. It comes from konos, which means vert or vertigo. And this is one of the main symptoms of Conium, is a certain vertigo, which is better closing the eyes, worse turning in bed. We'll go into more detail on that in a bit. I will mention as a first case, one of the instructors at NUHS, she travels she used to live in Colorado, now she lives in Seattle, I believe, and she travels and teaches there a few weeks every trimester. Louise Edwards is her name. She was out canoeing once and in one of the rivers out west, and came across a plant that kind of looked like parsley, kind of an umbelliferae, kind of that kind of plant. And she got close to it, maybe brushed up against it, and after that she got a horrible vertigo. And it was at, I think, it's called National College of Naturopathic Medicine. Then now it's National University for Naturopathic Medicine in Portland. And Andre was there, and he looked at her, took her symptoms, and said, "Oh, you need Conium." So I think what happened was she did a proving of the plant by being close to the plant. We used several different hemlocks in common name hemlocks in homeopathy. We have Athutius anapum, which is fool's parsley, which has vomiting of curdled milk. Cicuta, which is, I've seen it very useful for very severe seizures with opisthotonus, when people arch their backs. Oenanthe crocata is a very good remedy for seizures during the menses. Philandrium, I've used it for pain with lactation that goes back from the nipple. Abies canadensis has some stomach symptoms, some strange food cravings like radishes and things like that. It's part of the Apiaceae family or Umbellifera. That's because, we'll take a look here. This is a picture. It has these flowering units which look like a little umbrella. So that's the Umbelliferae. And the reason it's called maculatum means spot. And you can see here the stem. In the spring, you see these spots. Now, it's very similar to carrot, to parsley, to several other edible plants. And actually, there's quite a few poisonings every year. And it's originally originated in Asia and Europe, but now it's found all over the world, including the US, in habitats that are usually where there's disturbed ground or by the water. And people will sometimes mistakenly eat it, thinking that they're eating parsley or carrot or something, and will get quite sick and sometimes die. So we're going to talk a little bit about the toxicologic symptoms. But one of the ways to distinguish it is this: in the spring, the stem is very mottled. That's the maculatum part of the name. And also it has like a mousy odor, which is kind of, I would imagine, repugnant. We talked about that. Its active ingredient, some will say, is quinine, but there's other alkaloids. Alkaloids are basically organic compounds that have a ring structure with a nitrogen in there. So there's many alkaloids in it. Quinine is one of the most potent. It's poisonous to animals, especially to cows. But very interestingly, some birds are immune to its toxin: skylarks, finches, and robins. And actually, there are cases of people eating birds who've probably feasted on this plant to no effect to them. But when the people eat the birds, they do get conium poisoning. With cows, tremors are a common sign. And other symptoms are arthrogryposis, which I didn't know animals could have. I've seen a child with that, where the joints get frozen. Breathing problems, carpal joint. It basically causes joint problems and muscular and nervous system problems. For sheep, it also causes, it's toxic, ataxia, joint problems, salivation, kinked tail, weakness, death. In pigs, feces are well-formed and green with poisoning. Human poisoning, similar to animals, but confusion, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, muscle weakness, spasms, paralysis, and finally, it causes like an ascending paralysis is one of its key symptoms, and it leads to respiratory depression and death. This is the substance that Socrates was condemned to take. We got a little picture of that here. Here's some more pictures of the plant. See these inflorescences here? They're like umbel, like they look like an umbrella. And here's a painting of Socrates when he was condemned to die in ancient Greece. He was condemned to take conium juice and had ascending paralysis and had respiratory arrest and died. It also in humans can cause renal failure, tubular necrosis, but that's unique to the human poisoning. So it causes paralysis of the central and peripheral nervous system and respiratory failure, somewhat similar to curare, which is used in South America on the tips of arrows. The medicine is made from the entire fresh plant, but interestingly enough, the root of the plant can be eaten, although I wouldn't want to be foolish and eat it, but apparently it doesn't seem to be toxic at all. There, in the literature, you see some cases that have been attributed to conium toxicity in the past that probably weren't conium toxicity, because with conium poisoning, usually the mind remains clear and calm and the brain active. And some of the reported cases have seizures and delirium, and that's probably means it's not conium. For example, one of the cases, looking back, one of the authors thought it was probably a case of cicuta verosa, which is a much more violent, and it doesn't cause paralysis as much as it causes seizures, very violent seizures with apasantinus. And other cases by Onanthe crocata, probably that instead of conium. Yeah, so they were mislabeled. So really the hallucinations and delirium haven't been confirmed, and again are probably mislabels. From 1972 to 1990, there were 17 cases in Italy of conium poisoning after eating wild birds. One person died from respiratory failure after 36 hours, so it's a pretty rapidly progressive poison, and 3 died of kidney failure. A 19th century American doctor, self-prescribing or something, ate a large quantity of conium plant, mistaking it for parsley, there you go, and lost the feeling in his legs over the next 3 hours, so like ascending paralysis, and died of respiratory failure. It's very similar syndrome to Guillain-Barré, where you have an ascending paralysis, often after flu, but more likely after the flu shot. It's one of the leading causes of compensation in humans for vaccine injuries is the flu vaccine, and specifically Guillain-Barré syndrome. He remained alert, and again, poisoning by Socrates was probably conium. Pliny, who was a Roman naturalist, 440 to 70 AD, wrote about it and said it keeps down all tumors. And it's very interesting, since conium has been studied so well, and in this monograph, and people have had access to this monograph, I know I have prescribed conium a lot more, and very successfully in some very sick patients. Hopefully I'll get a chance to mention 1 or 2 of those, 1 at least. And Andre now uses, we just had a webinar today for the International Hahnemannian Study Group, and Andre mentions that basically with patients with cancer now that he knows about conium and studied it and put together this monograph, it's the #1 remedy he uses for treating patients with cancer. And he sees mainly people with stage 3 and stage 4 cancer, all different types of cancer. It's the #1 remedy he'll start them on. And then he'll switch maybe to other remedies or change things and increase the potency, etc. So Pliny knew, he said, for all types of tumors, especially tumors of the breast. Baron Stork in 1760 introduced it to more general use. That was before Hahnemann, because Hahnemann first published in 1796. And he said it was effective in curing scarus, which is a hard cancer, especially of the breast, ulcers, cancer, many other chronic diseases, cancerous diseases, enlargement of the glands, especially of those of scrofulous nature, like tuberculosis, the big glands of the neck. Nowadays, it'd be more likely to see that in, I have patients that have like lymphoma that have the big glands in the neck. Also as a sedative in mania, chorea, epilepsy, pertussis. It has a very peculiar tickling type cough, like a tickle in the left side of the throat, and a cough on just lying down. You would think of Drosera, but sometimes conium will be the remedy, and a lot of nervous system diseases. As far as the mania, I actually had a patient who responded. It was a difficult case because it was a difficult marriage, and the resolution was that she, Indian family, she moved back to India and divorced her husband, and I think they're both better off, but she had this horrible aversion to her husband's parents, or her in-laws. And conium was the one remedy that she took for a while, at least palliatively. It helped her to deal with her in-laws, and she treated them nicely. It was like the one remedy that she responded well to on that. It didn't last, but she's a lady who had been treated with every psychopharmaceutical remedy in every medicine, allopathic medicine, every dose, multiple shock treatments. None of it really helped her. Homeopathy allowed her to get her wits enough to decide that what she really needed was a divorce. As a medicine, it was used by all schools of medicine, not presently used in allopathic medicine, but allopaths used to use it in acute mania, tetanus, chorea, asthma. Eclectics like Eli Jones used it for paralysis, writer's cramp, vertigo, and I imagine for cancer. Hahnemann proved it around 1814. It's in the Materia Medica Pura. He started off with 89 symptoms and 286 from other authors. And then he decided it was an antisoric and put it in chronic disease, the first edition, and the number of symptoms swelled to 700. And by the second edition, he added 200 12 more, so that's 900 some symptoms. In the Materia Medica Pura, he stated the primary action of hemlock is a contraction of fibers and glandular swellings, like you would see in tumors, and suppression of the sensibility. Of my own homeopathic cures, glandular induration of the lip, the breasts arising from a bruise, and this is one of the keynotes of conium. It's tumors arising after injury. You get an injury to the breast or other part of the body, and a tumor arises. And also cataracts that are traumatic from trauma. And a kind of hypochondriasis, unmarried males, which are strictly chaste. So it has the whole idea of ailments from losing a spouse, imposed upon chastity, having sexual desire but not being able to express it, is one of the etiologies of conium. I'm not sure how that would manifest in animals, but I imagine there could be a correlate of that in animals. One interesting aspect Kent mentioned in his lectures on conium is all the sufferings are better by letting the limbs hang down. That's a famous symptom. If we look it up in the repertory, we see hanging down, letting the limbs hang down, ameliorates. It's also under aggravates, but it's much more well known for letting the limbs hang down. And it could be not just the limbs, but I saw a case where the patient wanted their head off the bed and their headaches were better. And that was the key to conium, and conium really helped the patient. So it's letting things hang off the bed seems to make it better. This passage by some people is wrongly interpreted to say that they want to put their limbs up, but that's really incorrect. It has an interesting relationship to the sun. It can like the sun, but it has an intense photophobia. And also one of its keynotes is intermittent urination. We see this, so conium is often used in elderly men where they start and stop and start and stop and start and stop, almost as if maybe there was a tumor or stones or something, or just prostate, enlarged prostate. It's interesting that a lot of the characteristic symptoms cannot be found in the proving and are purely clinical symptoms. And this shows the importance of clinical symptoms in homeopathy. We use them all the time to help cure patients, especially with serious illnesses. There is a movement in Europe that some homeopaths there feel that clinical symptoms are not reliable and they only want to rely on proving symptoms. But when you look at the school of the American School of Homeopathy, Lippe and others, Benninghaus, Lippe, Herring, etc., they had great success using clinical symptoms. And this is a good example. If you don't use the clinical symptoms of conium, you're going to be missing a lot. As a result of this monograph, there were 2,800 new entries to the repertory. And the repertory went from 6,700 to 9,600 entries, a 42% increase. So let's talk about the genius of conium. It's interesting. I've done, Andre's done dozens and dozens of these monographs, and this is probably the longest one he's done. I've done 5 or 6, and let me tell you, when you basically look at the literature, now we have a OCR literature, 1.5 terabytes, which it's of all books, old literature, old journals. And when you search through that for all references to a remedy, you look at all in reference works, in Radar, in Opus, you look for all the Materia Medica, you put it together, you look for all the cases, you put it together, and you put the cases in chronological order. You see the development of a remedy over time. At first it's used for certain things, and then certain people find it's useful for other things, and then maybe they find it's useful for cancer, and then it gets used a lot, there's many cases. You get to see really the evolution of a remedy over time, and it helps you to come up with the genius. So this is the genius that Andre came up with for conium. It's a difficult remedy to grasp, despite a great number of peculiar symptoms. The way he understands getting to the remedy is first he looks at temperature, and you have a chilly person, sensitive to cold and air drafts, like sepia. They can have ear pain from cold air, cold wind. But the person can desire and is better in the open air, and they can be either way, better or worse in a warm room. They could like being in the sun or be averse to the sun, but they're definitely extremely sensitive to the light of the sun, to the heat of the summer. So similar to nature mirror. So they have an element of sepia, element of nature mirror. And in fact, probably a lot of the time in the past when I would need to prescribe conium, I would mistakenly prescribe maybe sepia or more likely nature mirror. And that's especially because of the food cravings. They desire salt, bread, which is the same as nature mirror, and sour things similar to sepia. And they have an aversion to bread and milk, and worse from milk. So once you see this chilliness, sensitive to cold air, but maybe they like the cold air, extremely photophobic, the food cravings, you have those two things, then if you satisfy some of these criteria, you have some keynotes, a couple strong keynotes, or no other remedy is clearly indicated. You can't really rule in another remedy. There are symptoms that argue against it. And then you have a few confirmatory symptoms. That's when you can prescribe conium. And in fact, if you have a case of cancer, of tumor, you have to just consider it, basically rule it out. It should be, especially if it's malignant, it's a remedy you should think of, to be on your list of remedies to rule out and maybe at the top of the list. So here are some examples of how complex conium is. It has like two different aspects of symptoms. It can be timid, reserved, slow, passive, but also outgoing, outspoken, charismatic. As I mentioned, conium has a vertigo. The word konos means vertigo. It has a vertigo which is better closing the eyes. You can see that here. Closing the eyes, ameliorate. Conium's a 4. And also the nausea, headaches are better closing the eyes. But it has a peculiar symptom when it sweats. If it's going to bed, as soon as the eyes close, it will start to sweat. Conium tends to be worse from first motion, better from continued motion, like rust tox. But it can be, with exertion, it can be better, indifferent, or worse. Better while walking in the open air. But it can be suddenly worse at the end of or after a walk. Worse pains come on especially at night, and this is, or in the early morning. This is very, with cancer pains, this is very common because that's when tumors tend to grow, is at night when we're sleeping. So it has pains at night, rousing them from sleep. So we're worse at rest, and they can last all night. And the symptoms are rarely present during motion and are often gone during the day. Worse when walking in the open air. So it can be better in the open air, worse in the open air. Worse standing, sitting, or lying, changing position. Tends to be better in the heat of the sun because it's a very chilly remedy. So rheumatic pains, itchiness, but again, very photophobic with the sun. Worse from the heat of the sun in summer, even though it could be better. It's said to be a remedy for old people, but maybe it's just that people aren't diagnosed with it till they get cancer, when maybe they've needed it all along and just we haven't been able to perceive it. It's also under the rubric lack of reaction. But again, this could be just we haven't perceived the picture of it, and so we use it in cases where no other remedy has really worked. You see, it's a 3 here. That's a Benninghausen addition. This could also be because the mental picture didn't appear in the original provings, because they were mainly toxicologic. And it's only in more recent provings and cases that the mental emotional picture comes out. But even in the original provings, it had its own personality and had such symptoms such as unsympathizing and averse to being near people. So you think of like a remedy like nature mirror, the proximity and the talk, especially with the sun sensitivity and the craving for salt. The proximity and the talk of people passing by is very offensive to him, and he feels impelled to assault and maltreat them. Now, nature mirror would, unless a person has offended them greatly, would probably never do this, but assault and maltreat people. But conium, it has a definite edge to it. They want to lie down and be perfectly still with the eyes closed. Constant ill humor and vexation. So now we'll review some of the more important symptoms of conium, which are red flags in the case, so that you want to see one or two of these. As we mentioned, ailments from injury, so contusion. So we have someone has an injury to the breast, and then they come down with a tumor. You would think of conium, that would be one of the first remedies you would think of. But it could be to the testes, to other glands, the uterus, falls, contusions, shocks to the back or spine, operations, and often when arnica fails. We all know that arnica is a great remedy for trauma, but sometimes it doesn't work, or it has a stop point, and then we have to look for other remedies. It's one of those remedies to consider. Swelling, inflammation, induration of the glands, breast, with tingling, numbness, stitching, shooting pain after contusions and bruises. And again, these stitching, shooting pains would tend to be worse at night, as in cancer cases. Induration after contusion, difficulty to recover after loss of a sexual partner. That'll be an etiology. Easy sprains, muscle, spine. Pelvic condition due to a sprain, a fall with a displaced uterus. Again, cataracts following injury. See if it's there under cataracts. After injury, there aren't that many remedies. Conium and symphytum, hypericum, plantinus, and tellurium. That's a very good rubric. Tumors of all kinds, especially serous or hard tumors, maybe like stone, after contusions, fibroids, glands, so it could be lymphoma. Cancerous tumors can develop very rapidly, centimeter a week. In cancerous states, there's no appetite, general prostration, constipation, fancy to eat odd things, cancer of the stomach and liver with pains and vomitings, the photophobia we talked about, and lacrimation. They might wear glasses. And the photophobia is interesting because it's very intense, and you'd expect to find a lot of pathology in the eye, but often on examination of the eye, you'll see cases where the ophthalmologist looks at it, or whoever looks at it, the optometrist, said there's really not that much to see, but the person has intense photophobia. So it's out of proportion to the amount of pathology seen in the eye. So slight ulceration or abrasion, intense photophobia. Worse looking at moving objects, that's one of the symptoms of the vertigo. The vertigo is worse looking at moving objects. That's a black dot symptom for conium, one of Kunze's black dots. Another symptom in humans, I don't know if you see this in animals. I don't think animals would imbibe, I don't think, but I've known a few pet owners to give their animals some beer or wine. I've seen it happen. They're unusually susceptible to the action of wine or alcohol. These are the people that get intoxicated with one drink, like one cup of wine, one bottle of beer, one cup of wine, one drink, and they can't handle it. Vertigo is in the history is common to see. It's either a good acute prescription. I had a patient once who I prescribed conium to in error. She was a lycopodium patient, and I don't know why I went away from lycopodium. You know, sometimes you wander away from where you need to be. And I gave her a conium, and she's a young woman, just had a baby, very high-powered, bit nuxy, and business executive. And I gave her conium by mistake, and she got the most horrible vertigo, worse turning in bed, better closing the eyes, basically a perfect proving of conium. So this is a strong symptom, and if the person's going to prove, this will be one of the things that will come out. Needless to say, we marked that on our list and never give her again, and went back to her lycopodium, which she did fantastic with. They want to be still, which is common with vertigo, but they want to keep their eyes closed. Worse moving the head or the eyes, looking at moving objects. And one of the big symptoms of the vertigo is a worse turning in bed. I always ask that as and turning in bed. There are other remedies there, but conium is a 4. Belladonna has it, but I tell you the truth, I've mostly confirmed conium for that. So if they turn from side to side in bed and the vertigo is worse, you think of conium. Worse in the act of lying down, which is also similar to the cough. The cough is on first lying down, like tickling cough, often on one side, and worse lying down like Drosera. But the vertigo is worse on lying down or rising, bending the head forward. And it's a vertigo where the room seems to spin. It's an objective vertigo. We talked about the limbs hanging over the bed ameliorates better with the limbs hanging off. The intermittent urination starts and stops. And the disposition, uncompromising. Small disappointments and they'll break a relationship. Doesn't accept the mistakes of others, very perfectionistic. They can't accept flaws. They can be fanatics. The big remedy in humans for premenstrual symptoms, even without the appearance of the menses, especially with the breast, full, heavy, swollen breasts, sore breasts, and nodular breasts just before the period. This could be a precancerous condition. We think of other remedies like maybe Kali muriaticum. Cancer of the breast. It tends to be a right-sided remedy. With cancer of the breast, it's more left-sided about 60% of the time. We have retracted nipple, which is common with more advanced cancer. Itching of the breast. We talked about ailments from loss of the spouse or discords, even just discord. And you can see they're a person that they're unsympathizing, they're very fastidious, they want everything to be perfect. So it would be easy to have discords, and the discord could cause them to be sick if the family breaks up. There's a hypochondriasis, and it's identical to natrum mur in that when they weep alone. Conium is the main remedy, and you see natrum mur do the other one we think of. Aversion to consolation. They tend to have a very high sexual desire, and thus they have ailments from lack of expression. We talked about the worst turning in bed with the vertigo, low back pain, other symptoms. So those are the keynote symptoms that you want to see one or two of those to confirm when you see the chilliness, the liking cold air, but maybe the ears are worse in the cold air, and the craving for bread, sour, and salt. You want to see a couple of these symptoms and then some confirming symptoms. And from the personality we have for confirming, they're depressed, they weep by themselves, hidden grief, timid yet irritable, easily aroused to anger. This is interesting because this timidity with irritability makes you think of mercury poisoning. This is one of the key symptoms of mercury poisoning, which is erethism, which is a state where people, when they're first mercury poisoned, it's one of the first symptoms that comes on. They get irritable but shy. They don't want to be around people, but they get very irritable. Introverted, placid, indifferent, averse to companionship, shun society, but they dread to be alone. Dictatorial, fastidious, well-dressed, responsible, dutiful. They build a wall just like natrum mur. Grief, just like natrum mur. And tends to isolate herself just like natrum mur. So ailments from grief, silent grief, suppressed emotions, suppressed anger, conflicts in relationships, and because of their personality, the conflicts would tend to be more. As I mentioned, the one manic person who I treated, she would create conflicts when there were none because she just couldn't understand couldn't tolerate any interference from her in-laws. Even to call the house would be unacceptable to her. Difficulty expressing themselves, even in writing. He misplaces words, so there's kind of a neurologic element here. And one of the interesting aspects of the introversion is kind of a self-satisfaction, complete lack of anxiety with facing uncertain future and poor prognosis regarding their pathology. So here you have people with cancer, maybe late-stage cancer. They don't seem very, like, okay, yeah, I'm probably going to die in 6 months, the doctor says, and they don't seem very concerned, which is unusual. Most patients are freaking out when they get news like that. Aversion to the presence of strangers, recluse. They cannot urinate or pass stool if there are people near the bathroom, so not urinating in public would be more like natrum mur, or the stool would be natrum mur or amblyopia. They can show an indifference, potential affection, indifference to loved ones, like sepia, like phosphorus can have that in a burned out state. They can be indolent, lack of maternal instinct, not affectionate. I know animals have this who have litters, and after a while they'll just snap at their little ones, not wanting to have anything to do with them. They're done nursing, and that's that. You could think, especially if that was extreme or seemed unusual, you might think of giving some conium. They can be kind and affectionate, generous, caring, so they have that other aspect. They can be hurried. They can't sustain any mental effort. Slowness, weakness or loss of memory. Ailments and weakness of old men, widows and widowers especially. And again here from the loss of a sexual relationship. They don't want to do anything, be talked to or exercised. Debility of old people. Diseases caused by a blow or fall, cancerous, scrofulous with tight, rigid fiber. Can be for hypertension, stroke. Could be someone with broken down, tired of life. Fear of being alone, fear of robbers, like nature mirror. Fear of being alone, like maybe a bit of element of phosphorus here and other remedies. Anxiety about their health. Like Ignatia, they can have globus hystericus, lump in the throat. Let's see that. So it's a 2. That comes from Hahnemann. Peevish, vexed, easily put out by trifles. Again, it's not easy people to deal with. Can't endure any kind of excitement. They get weak and they get sad. They're family-oriented people. They're sensitive to disharmony in the family or to family breakups, divorce, separation, social injustice. They'll get sick. Sensitive to humiliation and quarrels, has dreams of those things. We'll get sick after that. Paralysis. Can have styes, milia of the eyelids, wens or sebaceous cyst. See here under styes, not necessarily any sidedness, recurrent styes, not necessarily upper or lower lids. Ptosis of the eyelids, again, this is like the paralysis, indurations. Superficial inflammation of the eyes, particularly the cornea, and they get ulcers and pustules of the cornea. Weak vision. It's a remedy when they have a lot of wax. I know animals get this too. They have to have their ears cleaned out. And this is something that, at least I know in humans, can change with a remedy. So increased wax, and actually it's a black dot remedy within that rubric, conium and lycopodium. Also causticum. Warts, face, hands, soles of the feet. Bleeding gums, you think of mercurius, recurrent tonsillitis, maybe laxus, mercurius, other remedies, phytolacca. Swollen glands, mono, goiter, epilepsy, ecchymosis, especially the ecchymosis leads to induration and maybe a tumor, heartburn, thirst for small quantities, you think of like arsenicum, especially with the weakness, impotency, high fevers. It's very much a menopausal remedy. If we look under menopause, conium is a 2 from Kent. With profuse perspiration and maybe some vertigo. Obesity, but can also be lean or emaciated from the cancer. It can have convalescence from acute disease after influenza, chronic fatigue after influenza. Tends to have, like sepia, chilly hands and feet. So the hands and feet are cold. It's a chilly person, cold hands and feet. Worse during snowy weather. I don't know about all of you, but here we just got snow in the last few days. Now it's getting dark at 4:15 or so, certainly by 4:30, kind of dreary. So if someone was a conium, this would not be good weather. Cough with deep breathing, worse cold air, and on first lying down, like Drosera. And again, it has like a tickling, spasmodic dry cough with tickling on one side of the throat. I believe tickling. Left side of the throat. Yeah. So tickling in the throat. Evening and night, worse change in position. Sleep is prevented because of the dry, teasing cough. Has itching or scratching. It's a common remedy for pruritus fulvae. Tremulous weakness after every stool. Better in open air. Acute sense of hearing, sensitive to noise and loud voices. You think of a remedy like a serum or iridium. Motion sickness, seasickness. You think of cocculus. Menses can be too frequent and scanty, or they can be profuse and protracted. And we mentioned with the menses, there's a great enlargement of breasts and nodules preceding, and maybe depression around the period. You can have shriveling of the mammae, atrophy of the mammae, cough during pregnancy, vomiting during pregnancy. We mentioned the menopause, sweats day and night as soon as one sleeps, or even when closing the eyes. That's one of the keynotes. If you don't see it often in practice, but when you do see it, you should right away think of conium if they sweat when closing the eyes. Although I don't think there are very many animals, if any, that sweat. But sweats on the head and the sleep, so you think of calcarb. A lot of modalities, but you're not going to find conium because of the modalities. It's going to be because of these syndromes that we've talked about. Worse in the morning, worse standing with weakness of the back, worse turning in bed, worse after a rest, worse 3 to 6 or 3 to 5. That reminds you of sepia. But the differentiation would be it could have the indifference of sepia, the chilliness, the cold hands and feet, the desire for sour, but it would tend to have the intense photophobia, which sepia would tend to love the sun. Stomach and abdominal pain, better lying in a knee chest position. Now I'll tell you about a case of mine. I had a patient come in. She's a practitioner here in Chicagoland, a natural practitioner, licensed practitioner. She lost her son in a car accident. He had been kind of addicted to prescription medication. He was starting to get better. He took a trip, died in a car accident, devastating to her youngest son. Her older son, and she had a younger son too. And it led to her divorce. She got so stressed. She had a very busy practice, which she was building. And she came to see me. She had just been to the emergency room the weekend, and I saw her up on Tuesday or Wednesday. And that Saturday or Sunday, she had been to the emergency room with severe stomach pain, couldn't think anything down, was losing weight. They did a CAT scan of her abdomen, and they diagnosed linitis plastica, which is a kind of a serous cancer of the stomach, routinely fatal. Usually operation doesn't help. It's actually kind of infiltrates the whole lining of the stomach. Surgery usually doesn't help. They told her that she had 6 months to live if she was lucky. She didn't believe that. She scheduled an appointment at Mayo Clinic. She came to see me. The peculiar symptom was she wanted to, the stomach pain was 2 to 3 hours after eating. And she wanted to, and in the office, she got down on all fours, like her elbows on the floor and her knees on the floor. And that was the only position that her stomach pain was relieved. She knew about homeopathy. She tried some remedies, didn't really help much. We had a very clear picture to conium. I can show you the graph if you like. I actually published the case in the American Journal of Homeopathic Medicine a couple years back. And so she was there with her sister. They were literally leaving my office and driving from Chicago to Mayo Clinic that night. And I gave her conium 30, and I also gave her 200. I said, take it as often as you need. If you take it, the pain's better, you wait. If it starts getting worse again, you repeat it. If the 30 isn't holding, go up to the 200. By the time, for the first dose, she started feeling better. The pain went from a 7, 8, went to 3, 4, 5. And as she kept taking it on the way there, she kept getting better and better and better and better. She got there, they scoped her. They did an EGD ultrasound on her, which is a better way of diagnosing the linitis plastica, because it's just a standard esophagogastroduodenoscopy can miss it because it's in the lining. You don't see necessarily an ulcer. They found a few ulcers. They felt the lining was fine. They repeated the CAT scan, and it actually looked better. And they said, well, you don't have this condition. She feels it was a healing. I don't know. Maybe the first CAT scan was at a miss, but certainly she improved dramatically with the remedy. And this was a key symptom. She wanted to be on all fours. Better occupation, better fasting, worse jarring, not so unusual, with breast, headache, restless, fidgety when sitting, change position frequently, worse and better from rubbing, lymphatic, swollen, blonde, pale, big abdomen, uterine disease. Children needing conium, chronic lymphatic enlargements with chains of glands enlarged. So if the kid with large glands is not responding to anything else, or a young animal, you might think of it. And this would be an early manifestation of conium. Chronic sprains, old-looking persons, prematurely old children, especially indicated in old people and among those in women, more women than men. So let's talk about a few cases. I talked about Louise Edwards. We talked about the Linitis plastica case. I've got 3 cases here. I'd also like to mention Susan Beal had a fish case. Susan, do you want to mention it or you want me to?
You can talk about it. It's a pretty simple case. You have about as much as I had.
You want me to talk about it or you want to?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, so Susan actually published this case. I thought it was very interesting. I mean, I'm really impressed by the vets always because you guys have to observe everything. The animals don't talk, maybe they talk in another language, but you know, it's not like us, we can ask tons of questions, you guys can't. So it was a fish, an old fish case that was published in the NCH journal. The fish had an abdominal mass, so like a cancer probably, and actually she biopsied it, and it was hard, so it was probably a cancer. Swimming upside down and backwards. So if you think of it, why would a fish swim upside down and backwards? So it had vertigo. You think like vertigo. It's like you're turned around. And slimy exudates on the scale. So conium has vertigo. It has abdominal tumors that are hard and also has slimy mucus. And the fish was apparently brought in a mayonnaise jar, a big mayonnaise jar. And so Susan put conium in the water and the fish got better, amazingly, got better. And saw him a few years later and he was still fine. So thank you for that story, Susan. That's an amazing story. Here's
pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah, I've never heard a story of a fish getting better with remedies, so I'm impressed. And the amount of observation. What's that?
I'll send you a couple others. We've got a few published at the Academy.
Cool.
A couple of cases, yeah.
I'd love to see them. And actually, we're having our meeting this weekend, the IHMA meeting. Everyone's welcome to attend from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. We are having it at NUHS, and one of your own is presenting. Jeff, you probably know the name. I've got it here. I met her in Chicago. Elisa Katz is presenting on veterinary homeopathic medicine. So you're all welcome to attend. And also Dr. Signori does great updates on homeopathy and dermatology. He's a dermatologist. He was also at the seminar. Great guy, and he presents some interesting homeopathic cases. Here's another case of a dog by Barrage. Dog had permanent ophthalmia. Eyes were closed by yellow discharge. Doesn't like to open them when bathed. Lies close to the fire, so chilly, and intense photophobia. Old dog, so old, intense photophobia, the discharge, it was very chilly, wanted to be close to the fire. Gave conium CM 3 times a day for 8 days. Improved slightly within a week. Opened the eyes on the 7th or 8th day. Left eye looks opaque, hole in it. Right eye also partly opaque, so there must have been an ulceration. On the 12th, she reported that the eyes had quite healed and the hole had disappeared. Also that he seemed much better in himself generally since taking the medicine. It was evidently a case of ulceration of the cornea. So homeopathic treatment of animals is of interest, especially for veterinarians, but for the rest of us too, because Our opponents can't say they were it was placebo effect or by faith, although some people you'll never convince of anything. The world is still, the Earth is still flat. And another interesting point they make here, which I find interesting, the animals don't read books on homeopathy and take their own remedies. Although I guess they could get into their owner's remedies and sniff and take a few, but usually that doesn't happen. In people, we get this all the time. Or even worse yet is the people that we give a remedy to, and then they go and take 10 different supplements and get acupuncture and get a chiropractic adjustments, and then come back and say, well, I'm much better, but the homeopathy had nothing to do with it. Another case, Trinka, a 6-year-old spayed female Dachshund, presented with right shoulder and neck spasm. So this is more of a neurologic case. And nerve root signature in the left forelimb, a nerve root irritation. We call like a neuralgia, a nerve root compression. And there was a history of falling off a deck 2 or 3 years before. And there was calcification, C566. They adjusted, didn't really help. Wants to be by her owners all the time, but doesn't want to be touched, unusual. Even the anticipation of being touched will make the spasm worse, as will neck extension. So still didn't, they canceled the acupuncture appointment. She did better, and then she jumped off the couch and right rear leg pain, spasm the lower back and neck again. Another adjustment, which hasn't helped so much so far, and then conium 200, and then like a new dog. And acutely painful again and been spasming, and adjusted, and conium 1M did very well. Only had 1 spasm last week when she got very excited about company. And then in December, not eating or drinking, crying and trembling, conium 10M. Much better, but still having some pain and some spasms. Wait on a redose, acute pain, and adjusted, then much better. And then she needed one more time in May of the next year, she needed to be redosed. This is a case of Earl. I don't know if any of you know who Earl is, published in 1998. And the final case I have is Jeff, a German Shepherd dog, paralyzed in the hindquarters at 12. The conventional veterinarians, not knowing about homeopathy, just suggested euthanasia. In conventional medicine, that's what we see a lot of that too. A lot of hospice euthanasia happening. Paralysis began after a hunting expedition when the dog got exhausted and frustrated. Must not have got any good catch. And the dog had a personality of being authoritarian. Had to be served as food first, would fight with other dogs, and also had a large prostate. So this is Grand George's case. He gave conium 9CH, and the paralysis disappears within 2 weeks. So that's it. So I gave this introduction to Jeff and to Susan, as I mentioned. So you guys are welcome to share it.
I actually mailed it to everybody, Tim. That everybody that I had on the list, and then the people that are in attendance as well. So if folks didn't get it, please get back with me.
Perfect. So that's my presentation. If anyone, we've got a few minutes. If anyone has any questions, I can certainly try to answer them. I see Todd Cooney's there. Hi, Todd. We're looking forward to having you come back to one of our meetings. I see Ashley's there as well. Anyone with any questions? Judy, I see Judy. I just saw Judy in Chicago.
Jeff, are people unmuted? Might be having a nap.
Can is anyone want to comment or say anything? I think Jeff unmuted everyone.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We could certainly.
Myself. I typed a question, but I guess nobody saw it.
Oh, I looking under questions. I don't see it typed. Where did you type it? Chat maybe?
Under
It's,
question.
yeah.
It doesn't matter. I can just ask you.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Who is this, by the way?
Jane Doyle.
Hi, Jane.
Hi. Thanks for doing this. It's very interesting to me because I lean toward Nat Muir and I'm hearing a lot of stuff in conium. So anyhow, I'm not sure that we can be certain that non-humans don't experience a placebo effect. I know it's commonly assumed, but I question that personally. But I've only been a veterinarian for a few decades, so
How
I'm
many
still.
is a few?
I'm sorry.
How many is a
Three.
few? 30.
Three.
Okay. Well, you and I are about the same. I've been practicing about 30 years. So,
Yeah.
you know, animals, we don't give them credit. I think their level of consciousness is.
They hear us thinking. They know our intentions on some level, and so the act of giving them something, you know, just that act has an effect, and our intention has an effect too. So, and
Absolutely. I think you're right. The animals don't necessarily know the language, maybe. Maybe they do, and they just can't vocalize it. They don't have the constructs to vocalize it in their
right,
vocal cords, whatever, but they can read the thoughts, the intentions, maybe.
right.
And it's very interesting. You see, actually, I have a colleague who, Jeff, you met Gaetan at the conference. He's the one who videotaped. He's doing a show, an online show about animals and amazing stories of animals, how animals help people. And the whole point is that animals will sacrifice themselves to help people, even at their own detriment, maybe even to their own death,
Mm-hmm.
to help people out. They'll do things that other people won't do for other people. Animals will do for people. It's like, you know, we always look at them as our lesser cousins, but that's being kind of anthropocentric, I think. I think there's a lot more consciousness going on in there than we give them credit for. So yeah, okay, maybe they respond to placebos. Just don't say that in groups of non-homeopaths because they'll use that against us.
I know, right? It doesn't do us any good to think about it that way. Yeah.
We can think about it, but we shouldn't say it in
Right.
people, with the skeptics are within earshot.
Yeah. Just a thought.
One of the other things, I think that's a great point. Uh, uh, Actually, and I think it's something that we don't always think about. You said something, Tim, earlier about animals and their relationship with alcohol, and it's actually a question that I have started asking people when I'm doing an anamnesis, because I've found over the years that there's really interesting relationships with alcohol, and actually preference for types of alcohol. You know, so it happened. It actually first happened. I had a dog case and a horse case that the one place was a kind of a fancy mucky muck barn, and they used to have cocktails in the barn, and you know, the horse actually had would come over the edge of the stall and try and get you know, specific types of alcohol. He would ignore beer and like whiskey or whatever, and you know, clients will say that their dogs, you know, will get into if they're drinking and watching the football game or whatever, and you'd be really amazed at how many times it's not that the humans are offering this, it's that the stuff is there and the animals finding it, and how many times that they'll have preference for beer over wine over a liquor like a whiskey or something like that. So I've used it a couple times in repertorization, and it's also something that I found has changed as you've had response to remedy.
That's
Ever
great.
what
I mean,
that's
you
worth.
guys are really the Sherlock Holmeses of the homeopathic world, because you have really can't leave any stone unturned to get a symptom. So you get something like that, it could be pure gold. And if they have the like easily intoxicated with just a little bit, then you know, and they have a tumor or something, then that's a good confirmatory for conium.
Absolutely.
Todd Cooney has a question. Todd. See if I can unmute you. I can't unmute you. Let me see if I can find your question.
You might put it in the chat, Todd.
I don't see it. For some reason, I can't see it on my screen.
Yeah, the questions aren't doing very well. The questions aren't doing very well on my screen either, but the chat is showing up, so you might catch it there if you can't unmute. And then if
Oh, I
when
see on the
Jeff comes,
chat is Jeff saying hi or thanks.
yeah.
For some reason, I can't. Let's see.
See, I see the questions thing, but I don't see anything about a chat.
Yeah, that may just be something to panelists.
Oh,
I'm
probably.
wondering if the organizer is the only guy who can get the question.
I'm in the questions pane, but I don't see any questions. Sorry, Todd. You can email me your question, doctimf@gmail.com. Be happy to answer it.
I'm trying to get a see if Jeff's there too. He may have stepped away because he can unmute everybody.
Hello.
Hey, Jeff.
There we are. Yeah, I was yelling before. I'm sorry it wasn't working. Todd's just saying, thank you for a great webinar.
Well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And hope to see you all or hear you all on Saturday from 10 to 1 Central Standard Time. Anyone who wants to attend, it should be good. One of your own, Elise will, and Jeff should send out the invite. Right, Jeff?
So I was gonna say, how do we get there? Yeah.
Online, just like this.
Yep, you mean the registration? I think that a bunch of people have registered and we'll get the reminders automatically, and I'll resend the original registration from January, but that'll be at the end of both the AVH and the Illinois webinars for 2019, right? This is the last one.
Yep, we already have the dates. When do you want me to get those to you, Jeff? 2020.
Anytime.
Okay. Well, I'll
All right.
reserve rooms first, so I know we have that, and then I'll send you an email.
All right, that's good. So thank you, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Judy, Stephanie, and all of the attendees. And thank you especially, Tim. We'll see you in 2020.
All right.
Thanks, Tim.
Another day we'll see you. All right, thanks. Bye.